You are welcome to yet another episode of HN What's Your Say? The #1 listening show, where we discuss real issues with real people like you. We are still featuring R. Kelly. Real name Robert Sylvester Kelly. Also known as the R&B King. The Mann Act, which is officially titled the White Slave Traffic Act of 1910, is a federal law that was enacted in the United States, with the intention of combating human trafficking and the exploitation of women. However, throughout its history, this legislation has often been misapplied and abused, turning it into a tool of social control, political persecution and racial discrimination. In this video, we will dive into the history of the Mann Act, explore its intended purpose and uncover the many ways in which it has been misused over the years. The Mann Act was signed into law by President William Howard Taft on June 25, 1910. Its primary aim was to address the burgeoning concern over white slavery, a sensationalized term used in the early 20th century to describe the forced prostitution of white women. The law made it a federal crime to transport any woman or girl across state lines for the purpose of prostitution, debauchery or any other immoral purpose. While the original intent was to combat sexual exploitation and human trafficking, the language of the act was vague and open to misinterpretation. This lack of clarity in defining immoral purposes set the stage for the law's misuse. Almost immediately after its passage, the Mann Act was used not only to prosecute genuine cases of human trafficking, but also to target individuals for consensual private behavior that deviated from societal norms. The broad and ambiguous language of the law allowed authorities to apply it to situations far removed from its original intent. One of the earliest and most infamous examples of the misuse of the Mann Act involved Jack Johnson, the first African-American world heavyweight boxing champion. In 1913, Johnson was prosecuted under the act for allegedly transporting his white girlfriend Lucille Cameron across state lines. Their relationship, while consensual, was scandalous in the racially charged atmosphere of the time. Johnson's conviction was widely seen as a racially motivated attempt to tarnish his reputation and curtail his influence. He was sentenced to a year and a day in prison, a punishment that highlighted the racial prejudice underlying the application of the law, as was later seen with R. Kelly. Ironically, despite the law's intent to protect women, the Mann Act was often wielded against them. Women accused of immorality or engaging in consensual relationships deemed inappropriate by societal standards could find themselves targeted by the law. In some cases, it was used to police women's sexual autonomy and reinforce traditional gender roles. The Mann Act has also been employed as a tool of political persecution, allowing authorities to target individuals for reasons unrelated to trafficking or exploitation. The use of the law against R. Kelly is yet another example in this category of use. Targeted for his music catalog rights, the Mann Act has been used to take down the king of R&B and open up a window for Sony Music Corporation to buy him out cheaply. In the 1940s, actor and filmmaker Charlie Chaplin was targeted under the Mann Act during a period of heightened political suspicion and moral conservatism. Chaplin, who was known for his leftist political views, became embroiled in a legal battle when he was accused of transporting Joan Barry, an aspiring actress, across state lines for alleged immoral purposes. The case was highly publicized, and although Chaplin was acquitted, the damage to his reputation was significant. Many believe the charges were politically motivated, reflecting the broader trend of using the Mann Act to punish individuals who challenged the political status quo. The Mann Act has a long history of being applied in racially discriminatory ways, particularly in cases involving interracial relationships. In the early 20th century, interracial relationships were taboo and often criminalized under state laws. The Mann Act became a federal extension of these prejudices, enabling authorities to prosecute interracial couples under the guise of combating immorality. In addition to Jack Johnson, numerous African American men were prosecuted under the Mann Act for relationships with white women. These cases were often less about enforcing the law's original purpose and more about punishing black men for transgressing racial boundaries. The law, in other words, became a weapon of racial control, reinforcing systemic inequalities and perpetuating the criminalization of black men. Over time, public attitudes toward sexuality, gender roles and race began to shift, leading to calls for reform of the Mann Act. In 1986, The Act was amended to remove the ambiguous language about immoral purposes, narrowing its focus to prosecuting cases of prostitution and illegal sexual exploitation. However, even with these changes, the law has continued to be misused in certain cases. In recent decades, the Mann Act has surfaced in high-profile cases involving celebrities and public figures. While some of these cases have involved genuine allegations of trafficking or exploitation, others have raised questions about the motivations behind the prosecutions and the potential for misuse of the law, especially in high-profile cases. In R. Kelly's case, for example, critics argue that the Mann Act's language, particularly terms like immoral purposes, remains overly broad and prone to interpretation. Many have come out to question whether the law's enactment focus on combating forced prostitution and trafficking aligns with the circumstances of R. Kelly's actions. This ambiguity risks confusing consensual relationships with trafficking. The Mann Act's inclusion in R. Kelly's prosecution raised concerns about overcharging. Case analysts suggest that the Mann Act charges were added to R. Kelly's charge sheet illegally to smuggle a conviction rather than address distinct criminal behavior. Supporters of Kelly's defense argue that the inclusion of the Mann Act muddied the waters of an already complex case. They point out that the specific charges under the Mann Act relied on allegations of travel arrangements that could be interpreted in various ways. For example, arranging travel for individuals does not inherently prove exploitative intent, particularly when the accused has legitimate professional or personal relationships with the individuals involved. By leveraging the Mann Act's broad language, prosecutors may have sought to paint Kelly's actions in the worst possible light, even if the travel arrangements were completely unrelated to the alleged abuse. The history of the Mann Act offers important lessons about the dangers of overly broad and ambiguous legislation. When laws are written in ways that allow for subjective interpretation, they can become tools of abuse themselves, enabling authorities to target individuals for reasons unrelated to the law's original purpose. While combating human trafficking and sexual exploitation remains a critical priority, it is essential to ensure that laws like the Mann Act are applied fairly and consistently. Policymakers must strike a balance between effective enforcement and the protection of civil liberties, guarding against the potential for misuse. The Mann Act's history also highlights the need to address the structural inequities that enable the misuse of laws. Racial discrimination, gender bias, racial and political persecution have all played a role in the application of the Mann Act, reflecting broader societal issues that must be confronted. The Mann Act was born out of a genuine concern for protecting vulnerable individuals from exploitation. However, its vague language and broad scope opened the door to decades of misuse, turning it into a tool of social control, political persecution and racial discrimination. By examining this history, therefore, we can better understand the importance of crafting laws that are clear, specific and grounded in principles of justice and equality. Only by learning from the past can we hope to build a legal system that truly serves the interests of all members of society. If you want to be featured in our video releases, send us your clips by emailing them to hnnewsroom242@gmail.com or use Google Drive for larger files. Be sure to include your name and any details you'd like us to know. We can't wait to showcase your contributions. That is all we had for you today on HN What's Your Say. To keep updated whenever we post a new video, subscribe to this channel now. Also remember to hit the bell icon and enable notifications. And feel free to share your opinions with us in the comment section below, and let us know if you would like us to publish your views in our next release. We value all our subscribers' opinions.